Hello, everyone, listeners and viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a super special episode today. We're going to talk about Pride awareness, and why not take this opportunity and use this platform to blast the message out there, how we can have a more inclusive world and we can have a more inclusive industry. So for today, we have very special guests. I'm Michèle Kline with Kline Hospitality, and my co-hostess, Stephanie Leger with First Rate Hospitality. Stephanie, take us away.
Thanks, Michelle. So nice to have everyone back on again. So we'll start off with Robert here, have everyone be able to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into those WTF stories. So Robert, tell us about yourself and to our viewers as well.
Great, thank you. My name is Robert Geller. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I am the founder of FabStays Inclusive Accommodations. And we are a platform that recognizes welcoming safe spaces. These are accommodations all around the world. And we've started in the short-term rental space. That's where our roots are. We are now adding RV rentals, campgrounds, and boutique hotels as well. We've really started in the short-term rental space. And it really came from my experience as a short-term rental host on one of those platforms that we're all pretty aware of, one of those OTAs. And it was from that experience, I know often if I was interviewed, whether it be the Wall Street Journal or Consumer Reports, they all want to hear what my discrimination story was. And it's not that at all. We have a very positive narrative, and really it came from when I would have guests. Mine was a home share. And I would have my guests check in. And of course, it always starts with, how was your flight? And then I would share with them all the things I would recommend in my city, the different experiences for them to enjoy. And then typically a benign question would come up. And that was, what do you do for a living? And that's what the person would ask me. They're 1.5 feet away from me in my own home. And I was then confronted with, do I tell them that I own a gay travel company? Because that's what I do for a living. And here I am having to make a split-second decision. Again, they're 1.5 feet away. They're staying in the room next to mine where they have their own private bedroom, private bathroom, but we have a shared space. And I'm wondering and going through my head, how do I answer that? I mean, it's a pretty benign question, but all this anxiety, and it happened every single guest. And I realized, well, there's an opportunity to improve the guest and host experience in that environment, in that short-term rental experience, whether it was a home share or if it's a private space or if it's in a boutique hotel. It all comes down to hospitality. And hospitality is anticipating guests' needs. And I just saw, like I said, an opportunity to improve the experience. And really what it was, again, it wasn't a discrimination incident, but what it was, and it really comes down to the core that anyone in the LGBTQ plus community can relate to, and that is each of us have our own lived experience of coming out. And that's coming out to our family member, it's coming out at work, to a new friend, and then we're confronted with this coming out experience again at a new job, traveling. And I'm just like, wow, we have an opportunity here to take that out of the equation in the travel experience. And that's something that happens when a member of the community is looking at a property or, an accommodations, and they're looking for hints and signs. Is this place welcoming? Is this a safe space? And that's where we have that opportunity to create education. And that's where Naomi is going to touch on as well, is that we're also creating an LGBTQ plus inclusive hospitality education and certification. So the hosts on our platform have that badge, and anyone visiting our site in the LGBTQ plus community knows with confidence that where they're staying, they are staying and welcome with open arms.
That is so super cool, Robert. I'm having mixed feelings, right? On the one hand, I think this is so amazing, right? That you guys have created this. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking it's so sad that you need to create a safe space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to
well, and I look at two
follow.
answers to that. One is, we're a niche accommodations platform, and we're no different from Muzz B&B, She Wonderful, Femme B&B, Noah B&B, Bring Fido, which is traveling with pets. So if you look at it from that perspective, there are niche platforms out there. But on the other side of the coin, if you look, and this is something that Naomi and I have included in our inclusive hospitality education, is we share with our hosts, we give them a glimpse at our news feed, at what we see in our news feed, and it's probably different from what you see. And when you take a look at it and you see what's happening throughout the country, throughout the world, you can see where there'd be anxiety and apprehension in travel. When you look at, 70 countries where homosexuality is criminalized, it's punishable by death in 11 countries. I mean, so that's an anxiety that we're keenly aware of.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing. We'll have Naomi introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi Ardjomand-Kermani, and I use they, them pronouns, or you can call me Nay or Om, either way. I am the owner of A Different Kind of Different, which is both an inclusivity sort of consulting agency, but I'm also a safer sex educator. What I also do, though, is create curriculum and different program planning for different organizations as sort of capacity building assistance, so that they have sustainable programs and that they are providing the best quality of service to their clients, whoever those clients may be. I guess if we're talking about stories and interesting stories, I'm queer and I'm trans, so I have come in contact with both different sides of the coin when we're talking about welcoming or unwelcoming. And Robert touched on something earlier that, in our gay community, we had something that was called the Damon Guide back in the day. And it was how we were able to look and make sure that there were places that were safe for us to be, or places that were safe for us to go. And as someone who lives in Florida, we're in St. Petersburg, which is wonderful, very welcoming, incredible community. I'm from San Francisco and I'd rather live here. So very, very welcoming community here. But even so,
I was waiting for that but.
Even so, we're in the South. And my wife and I are still very careful wherever we go. And it may not be a scary situation. It may not be your worst case scenario that you're going to see in the front paper, but it's these little microaggressions that are like dandruff on your scalp. And after a while, that dandruff collects, and you start getting a scab. And it really just becomes this overwhelming feeling. So my wife and I constantly are mistaken as sisters, which is just ridiculous, or we're asked if we're best friends. And it's funny that we have someone here who's in Vegas, because we got married in Vegas in October. And I'll tell you what, I really expected Vegas to be really cool. They were the worst state I was in before.
Yes, I am so sorry.
No, not in terms of discrimination, but in terms of people just could not get it, that we were not there as sisters. We were not there as two best friends who were getting married the same day. It didn't matter that we were both wearing our wedding dresses in the hotel, holding hands. We were still asked, where are the grooms? Where are the grooms? So, on your wedding day, that's the last thing that you want to experience.
It was the tourists. It wasn't really the locals. It was the tourists.
No, it was hotel staff, actually.
Oh, no. I don't want to know which state.
It was hotel staff. Actually, at check-in, we had the same thing. When they ask you, what are you here for? We said, our wedding. And they said, which one of you is getting married? And we said, well, we're both getting married. They go, oh my God, that is so fun. Where are your soon-to-be husbands? And I go, no, we're getting married to each other. See how I have a about to get married t-shirt? She does too, and it's pointing at each other. So, it actually was not so many tourists. It was a lot of hotel staff. And that's why when Robert approached me about having this opportunity to teach accommodation staff in general, we're talking about just hospitality in general, this gave me a moment of, wow, yes, that would be fantastic, because it would have been great if we didn't have a Mr. and Mrs. towel that was put out in our room. It would have been great if someone hadn't made that assumption. And beyond that, you know, as somebody who's trans and who doesn't use Mrs., it's even more of a conversation that I don't necessarily want to have, because then I have to suddenly become an educator when I'm there on vacation, wherever that may be. So to give the opportunity to teach people, you just can't make assumptions, because what you see is not always what you're going to get. And you have to make sure that your language reflects that you're aware of that. That's why I'm here.
Well, thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing. And you know, I'm on the road right now and training on luxury service standards, and the traditional service standard is using pronouns with Mr. and Mrs. or Ms. When using the guest name. And now with building that awareness for the hotel staff is making sure of how we're addressing them is to how they would want to be addressed, instead of just assuming and going with that traditional luxury service standard that now if they don't use it, they're going to get dinged on missing out on the standard. But I think it goes further in making sure that our guests are being taken care of the way that they want to be addressed. And I foresee that we'll start seeing that even on the telephone as well, like PBX or the operators, that they'll start seeing more of the pronouns as well, to being able to address the guest.
And what a great opportunity, Stephanie, to really, you know, do a shout out for those organizations that are the ones that are rating these different brands, so that they can start getting with the program and maybe reevaluating those things that are on the audit sheets to make sure that it matches what's happening today in, you know, nowadays.
Yes,
and to the point, you know, something in our training is that we talk about how those standards are based on Victorian out-of-date standards. Where everything is based on male and female. So it's interesting how even to this day that it's being used. Yet there was a great article in the New York Times talking about this and how removing sir and ma'am from restaurants is happening, and you'll see it in hotel brands as well.
Absolutely. Mirroring people's language is so important. I'm the first person to say that I don't believe in the golden rule. I believe in the platinum rule, and that's treating other people the way that they want to be treated, because the way that I want to be treated isn't always going to be the way that they want to be treated.
Absolutely. James, tell us about you. Tell us who you are.
Well, thank you. And first and foremost, happy Pride Month. We're very excited that it's National Pride Month, and we are celebrating. Naomi, I'm very sorry to hear of your situation in Las Vegas over your wedding. When was your wedding? October what?
October 17th. It was 18 years to the day of our first date.
Congratulations. My husband and I got married October 16th. But
oh my goodness,
not in Las Vegas.
Congratulations.
So, yes. But to your point, I've been a resident of Las Vegas now for almost 30 years, and I'm the director of operations here at one of those hotels that I hope was not the one you were staying at. And but to your point, Vegas, of course, back in the day was a good old boys town. It was run by the mob. Obviously, that is not the case for the last couple of decades. It's a lot more corporate run and run by several companies. And the company I work with, and most of the companies here in Las Vegas, have really embraced diversity and the understanding, and particularly in the LGBTQ plus community, for a couple of reasons. Number one, a large majority of the workforce in hospitality, as we all are aware of, falls into that category in some way or shape or form, right? And our guests, right? You are our guests, I'm a guest, everyone is hopefully at some point is a guest of Las Vegas. And it was really important about the early 2000s that the companies started realizing that, and they started offering same-sex benefits to partners, right? Obviously, we didn't have marriage equality back then, so these companies offered that. But the training goes on, and unfortunately, Naomi, in your situation, we still don't pass all the time. And that's why these type of podcasts and education and organizations like yours are so important, because this has to be ongoing. It has to be constant. And it has to be something that is first and foremost in the minds of the companies, particularly in hospitality, as we want to make sure that our guests, right, like Robert said, don't have to feel like, and Naomi, you mentioned too, do I really want to go through that whole explanation why I am who I am? Well, I am who I am because I am who I am, you know, and I love being who I am. And that's, why should I have to sit there and explain myself or justify who I am? And that's really been a part of what I've really been focused on. I've been a LGBTQ plus leader in Las Vegas for the last couple of decades, and everything from Las Vegas Pride. I was the president of Pride and a board member for 18 years. I was one of the founding members of HRC, Human Rights Campaign Las Vegas, back in 2004, and have done a lot of other things, as well as being a state representative. I was a state assemblyman, and I helped pass marriage equality and start the process of taking out the discriminatory language in the Nevada State Constitution that deemed marriage as a definition of only between a man and a woman. And fortunately, with the Supreme Court ruling, as we all know, we have marriage equality. With the recent political climate, we understand that that is in jeopardy. And so I continue to fight, and I'm proud to say that the state of Nevada is actually one of the most progressive states in our union when it comes to LGBTQ plus, but more specifically in transgender laws. And we're very proud of that. And one of our former state senators, you know, he pioneered that. And this was 30 years ago. He first mentioned the word transgender in the Nevada legislature. And from that moment on, we worked really hard. And that was even when we were a red state. We've since changed that, but the laws have been something that we've had to fight really hard for. And we're very proud of that record here in Nevada. And a lot of the companies, and of course, Nevada is primarily, our industry is hospitality, is really understanding that value and why it's so important that we embrace this. And so we're very excited to be a part of that.
Yes. Thank you, James. Well said. And truly agree. And also too, it's not just with our guests, but also too with our colleagues and our coworkers, as well, of making sure that we, you know, create this safe environment for them when they're in their department and working, even with front of house guests or back of house vendors too.
Well, Stephanie, that's been a huge recruitment tool that the companies here in Las Vegas have used, right? Is that they've understood that they need to have a package of benefits that speak directly to those members in the LGBTQ community. You know, we were very excited when we launched transgender health rights benefits and assisted with the surgeries and the treatment and the medications and the follow-up, all of that went through, and that was so important. And as a result of that, you know, we have been able to draw incredible talent that's much needed in the hospitality industry, because we understand the value of what those benefits mean. And it's not about checking a box, it's about doing what's right. And it's about, do you want the best of the best when it comes to team members to take care of your company and your guests? Then you have to provide what is necessary for those team members to be with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I want to chime in for a second. I talk about recruiting and staffing and challenges from that perspective quite often. And this is an extremely important topic when it comes to that cutting edge. When we look at recruiting, we don't necessarily are experts in, you know, our talent acquisition teams are not necessarily experts in selling or presenting those packages of benefits to the candidate out there the right way. And how important is it when a company works so hard towards benefits like the ones your organization has, to make sure that we're exposing those so that more people can learn about it and realize this is the place for you. Because it's really not about checking the box, because it is more expensive perhaps to the organization, or the organization maybe had to go through some hoops to make it happen, right? So it is not about checking a box. It's truly genuine, an organization that cares about the candidate. So it's, let's embrace it. Let's, for those talent acquisition experts out there, let's make sure that we are truly getting in tune with what it is that our companies really offer the candidates out there, because this is exactly the type of stuff that we want to see out there.
And I wanted to go back to something that you had said at the very beginning, Michèle. You had said something about how, how sad is it that we even have to have this topic, that we have to talk about these things. But, every time I teach a workshop, people will, there'll always be some naysayer in the crowd that will say, oh, we're really just pandering to this group now, when that's exactly the opposite of what's happening. If we're treating everyone as if they are X, Y, and Z, we don't need to know what their background is. If we're providing an inclusive and welcoming environment where we're telling everyone about all of the things that we have available to them, and we're also speaking to them in the languages that they want to be spoken to, then it's helping everyone. In the same way that we ask, or that I ask rather, people to use their paperwork in a way that has chosen name as well. Well, my wife is cisgender, and maybe she wants to go by her middle name, Marie. It really is just helping everyone all together. Janet down the street may actually have a first name that's Michèle, but she wants to go by Janet. So offering that line item is actually helping everyone. And the best way that we can present this to people is that this isn't about being a streamlined approach to one specific group of people. This is, how can I welcome everyone, and what language can I use, and what signs that can I use to show them, if you are in these groups that are the most marginalized, I've used language now for you to know that it's a safe space for you to tell me what you want to, if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. When Robert was talking at the beginning, I was thinking, when I had 2 pregnancies, I have 3 kids, but 2 of them were twins. And in each one of the pregnancies, I felt like a knot in my throat when I was getting ready to tell my boss that I was pregnant. And that meant that potentially I was going to be out of work for a little while, right? I can only imagine how it feels like to hold a secret like that for however long it is, right?
Especially when we're in a nation that's saying it's okay for you to be whoever you want, when in reality, in practice, it's not only that it's not usually that. I listened to that episode of yours, by the way, and I really enjoyed that episode about motherhood.
Thank you for that. So it's like, I'm thinking, I am nervous for maybe 3 months, 12 weeks. Imagine someone who's in that position where they've realized, this is my calling, this is what makes my heart sing, this is who I am, like, F it, right? And how, if you're in a situation, I don't know if either of you have ever been in a situation where you had a team member perhaps who felt like they could lean in and speak with you about it, right? I've done a little bit of work with youth, and not too long ago, maybe about 1.5 years ago, I had someone in the group who felt like she could lean in and talk some more. And I thought it was epic, the fact that she felt that way, that she was asking for someone to help her figure out how to say this. How do I say this? So do you have maybe a story you can share of perhaps in your career, a team member who you felt really needed that ear, and perhaps you became that mentor to help them come out, and what is the best way to come out, or perhaps how to deal with the day-to-day, right? And if you don't have a specific story, would you mind each one of you sharing what tips can you give team members in our industry out there to feel like it's a safe zone and they can come out with their bosses, or the people they're working with or their family members or friends? And if not, how do they deal with very specific situations that you deal with on a daily basis?
You know, it's interesting when I think about what James had shared, that, you know, he's at a company that is creating a space for team members that, you know, to feel safe and to feel that they can share and be themselves. And I know Naomi can speak to this to quite a bit as well in her field. I'm sure. I mean, I've seen on your feed people reaching out to you, Naomi, you know, sharing all the safe spaces that you've created. So, you know, I think in, you know, those two instances, and each of you can share it more in depth, but having those environments, that's where it fosters having those discussions where someone is going to feel comfortable, they know they're safe. It's not like me with that guest wondering how it's going to unfold. You've already created the environment where you know how it's going to unfold. It's going to be safe and welcoming.
Yeah,
culture rules for sure.
I was going to say, I like to say that I am flamboyantly myself at all times, and I'm authentically me at all times. And I had the privilege of that because I'm completely out, but I wasn't out until I was 27 years old. And so I do remember what it was like in those cases. And I do remember how scary it was to even think about, well, they're talking about my boyfriend, but I don't have a boyfriend. You know, it was a very uncomfortable position. But when I came out, I just stopped caring about that. But again, I was in a really privileged position to feel safe where I was. And I felt safe because they had, for example, a clearly posted non-discrimination policy. That to me was huge. That is bigger to me than any rainbow flag, trans flag, whatever cute little heart sticker you want to put on a window. Showing me that you have a policy for non-discrimination is number one. It's key. Mm-hmm. You know, as Robert mentioned before, I have a lot of people that I think are just attracted towards me with their stories because I am so bold. I am so out there. I am so me. I don't often have people lean in team environments where they need help coming out because often they have their own path. What I do have often though, and I would love to mention this just because it's something that's a trap that people will fall into. I've had too many people lean into me expecting me to teach them everything that they need to know. And that's a lot. It's in fact the reason why I left my last job and decided to go fully independent, because every day was a microaggression. Every day I was misgendered. Every day I was spoken to in the way I should not have been spoken to. And then I was asked, well, what did I do wrong? Well, how should I have said that? And that's lovely. I love that we're asking and everything else. But when I'm an employee, when I'm on the job, it's your due diligence as the boss, as the supervisor to figure that one out and then come back, apologize and move on, because that's the content of your character. Asking me to educate you after you've wronged me just makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. And then James, what about you? Sorry, Stephanie, go ahead.
Real quick, I know I was also an owner of one of the only LGBT restaurant brands that's out there, and why I did that along with my career was because of the safe space that it created for its guests, but more importantly for those individuals that wanted to finally be able to work, earn a living, and be who they were. And for me, that was everything. To have employees come up to me and say, thank you for allowing me to be me at work and be good at what I do because of who I am and not be judged for who I am. And that to me was worth every penny I invested into that. And at the end of the day, I still have those individual team members that came up, and this was, 2004, 5, and 6, that come up to me and say, I feel I'm successful because you gave me an opportunity for me to be me. And that to me is just, there's nothing better in a heart than that.
Great.
That's great. I just wanted to go back quickly along the lines what Naomi was saying is also how about with your coworkers as well? And here they want to make sure that they are addressing you accordingly, but then they just don't know because they haven't been exposed. or maybe from their upbringing, or in an area of a town that isn't more out there and talking about it, but they still want to making sure that they are showing that respect as well.
I always tell people that you can't do better until you know better, but once you know better, you should do better.
Yes.
So one of the best ways that I can just tell, anyone who's going to be listening to this podcast, when you introduce yourself, introduce your pronouns as well. Hi, I'm Naomi, and I use they and them pronouns. That one opens up the door. If somebody has no idea what I'm talking about, they're like, I don't even know if I have a pronoun. Okay, that's the starting point. I can tell you at least what you need to know so that you can then do the rest of your work to figure more out. But not only that, when I say, hi, my name is Naomi and I use they, them pronouns, the most important part about that is that coworker who wasn't sure that they were going to be able to actually be themselves now knows that I'm a safe place. Oh my goodness, my name is so-and-so and I use these pronouns. Okay, so it's an opportunity for people to learn, Stephanie, like you said, not everyone is going to know better. In my signature, my email signature, it has my pronouns, and it also has a link that says pronouns, why are they important? And people can click on that and then they can learn. I'm always willing, if I have presented myself in a work environment, I have my educator hat on. I'm always willing to have that conversation the first time. And then after that, I tell them that the power of Google lies within them. And that if they have any questions after that, I'm more than happy to answer, but that my job is X, Y, and Z. And my job, unfortunately, does not include educating someone for free. So I try to make that very clear right off the bat. But, it's been much harder with bosses and supervisors than it has ever been with colleagues. With colleagues, it has always been a workable teaching moment. It's often been a time of self-discovery for them as well, of understanding that, okay, I may be cis, I may be heterosexual, but wow, I didn't realize that there were so many other aspects of my identity that there were to explore until I had this conversation with you. So it's a delight to get to be a part of that process. And it is so common that they are the ones who are most likely and most open to hearing what you have to say, for sure.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because you're on an even playing field at that point. That if they say something that may offend you or they may hurt your feelings, what they may think may hurt your feelings or something, they know that there's not going to be a repercussion in the way of coming from the top down, right? And that's why, Stephanie, when you asked me, do you offer any sort of explanation? I do, because we're on that equal playing field together. We're in this together, whatever our roles are, our purpose is to do something together to provide a product, a service, et cetera, whatever that may be. So they know that they can trip up, they can make a mistake, and I'm still going to be there. With bosses, it really is a mixed bag of either they don't take enough time to really think before they speak, or sometimes they outright just don't care. And for them, it's sit down and smile. I hired you. I'm paying you, so I can call you whatever I want. They're not saying that. But after so many days, so many years of being called the wrong thing, they're saying that.
Wow.
Also, Naomi, you touched on something though, also that if someone makes a mistake, and Michelle, Stephanie, I think this is something to bring up as well for your listeners, that we're going to make mistakes. And it's okay to make a mistake. We're going to learn. If you're making a mistake from a place of caring, we correct one another. And if it's coming from a place of genuine hospitality and concern and caring, yes, it's okay. And I guess I'm pointing to myself is because I make mistakes. I'm learning. The language evolves. Especially in our space. LGBTQ plus. Just like culture, it evolves, and so does the language. So it's being open to the, how it evolves, and it's okay to make a mistake.
For sure, absolutely.
Robert, if I could join on that, is a good example of that from my own example would be when I was president of Pride, and this is when the pronouns were really first just coming on the scene, being something that we started to use. And we were at a meeting and we were getting, just blasted by a community member who, never participated with anything but wanted to criticize. And she had made a comment, and again, this was very first time. I had never heard the term cis before. And she said, well, you cis something about you cis gentlemen. And I thought she said, you cis gentlemen, and was pointing to the board, and she had been attacking us because we were men throughout the meeting. And I said, well, there's 5 gentlemen up here. This individual is trans. And she just let me have it because I didn't know. And to Robert's point, right, we're going to make mistakes. And she said, well, shame on you. You are the president of Pride. You should resign right now because you didn't know what that term was. And, that is something that I think happens in our own community, is that we attack because people are not educated. And I believe that that's one of the downfalls of our community, is that instead of saying, like Naomi said, right, I am more than happy to share with you what that may mean if you've never heard that before. And Robert, you said it, it's coming from a place of care. It's a mistake, correct, a place of care versus an attack, or versus trying to just be nasty and not use a pronoun because you want to make a statement that I'm not going to use pronouns, right? And so that was it was an eye-opening moment. And I said, wow, you're a community member and you are asking me to resign my position because I didn't know. And number one, I thought she said something else. And I turned to my vice president. I said, what does cis mean? And he pulled it up and showed me. And I said, okay, well, I apologize, but thank you. At least he educated me. I wish you had. And I think that in the workplace is one of the best tips I can give, right? Is that it is up to us as leaders to create that safe space, as Naomi said, right? Coworkers are coworkers. You will deal with coworkers, but that's part of you being a leader. That coworkers are not also being accepting and providing a safe space, just as if your customers are not. If your customers are creating a nasty, hostile environment, then as a leader, right, I throw people out. I throw people out of the hotel all the time. Not just because they cussed at somebody, but because they either made fun of somebody or they were just nasty to somebody who may be trans or who may be a flamboyant or something of that nature, just because they are who they are. And I think as leaders, we have to take more of that step, because that will show your employees that, look, this is a leader who protects me. And if I feel safe, if I feel focused, then I can be a better employee. And I can do the job that I'm here to do because I have a safe space to do it. And I don't have to even be worrying about that. To Michelle's point at the very beginning, we shouldn't even have to be talking about this. And if we can create that safe space, let an employee be focused on the task at hand. And in our industry, it's hospitality. Let us take care of the guests at hand versus be worrying about, are they, is somebody going to write something nasty on my locker or leave a note? Are they laughing or making fun because I'm going through the transition or whatever the case may be? It's up to leaders, and leaders have to do that. They have to lead, and they have to be bold.
And James, I have to thank you because someone was thrown out of one of your properties on our behalf, and I really appreciated the fact that management stepped up, because it was a little bit of a spectacle that neither my wife or I expected to have happen, and there was no issue. The person was removed right away, and that was such a wonderful experience. But you're right. If I'm worried about the way that I'm going to be treated by my coworkers and by my bosses, what a heavy load to carry to then provide hospitality to treat other people the way that they want to be treated when I'm not being treated that way myself.
Sorry you had that situation, but I'm glad it was handled.
Oh, it happens everywhere. I'm sure you know. Sure. But I wanted to also touch on something that you had said about that experience when you were the president of the Pride Board. Robert and I talk about this all the time. There's so much gatekeeping even within our communities. Yep. There is so much gatekeeping. I'm somebody who's a-binary trans, and a lot of trans individuals will tell you you're not really trans. And when I say a-binary trans, I mean that I don't have a gender at all, period. Some people really can't stand that. And they're like, well, then you're not trans, you're this, that, or the other thing. There's always this sense of elitism, especially within our community, that happens. And I think that it's almost a place of defensiveness because of so many years of having to fight back against people that we've started fighting against each other too. And it's a shame. It's an absolute shame that that's happening. I think that we're forgetting about the steps that are involved in anyone's learning process.
I think we have to remember, right? We have a generational gap, right?
Yeah.
My husband is significantly younger than I am. And he is in a generation that grew up where, fortunately for him, there wasn't nearly the amount of discrimination. He was used to seeing gay couples, lesbian couples, trans couples. It just didn't matter as much to them. It's just how they grew up, right? Yet my generation, even when we added the letter Q, right? It was a big deal because I used to get, attacked verbally and friends physically and be yelled queer. And so for an older generation and as president of Pride, I had a hard time saying that we would accept and this was 5 or 6 years ago, the Q in there because of what that connotation had to me. But then I heard from the younger generation and that they related to Q as being a positive. And I said to myself, why would we want to hold on to the negativity when it can be used now as a positive and move forward for the generations to come? And so now I have no problem using the Q.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. Any last final thoughts before we close? I mean, this was a great topic that we were talking about today.
I have one WTF quick story that I want to share just for the sake of creating awareness, right? Many moons back, I'm not going to say how many, I had, I was putting together a team of housekeepers. The company I was working for was taking over the management of a housekeeping department. And the people I was working for were very traditional in the way they would do things, right? So I'll give you an example. If we needed a spa attendant to clean overnight, please, overnight, meaning there is no one there, it had to be a woman because women are more detailed. So it couldn't be a guy, right? So that's just a little sauce to it. So going back to the story of putting together this team to manage the housekeeping department, there was this outstanding houseman or house attendant who was going through a transition. Beautiful blonde hair, always in a bun, right? Because she at that point wasn't very sure, but couldn't let it out. And one day he came up to my director of housekeeping and he explained, I want to go through the transition and I'm still a little bit confused. And, I'd love to, as part of my journey, to move on to be guest room attendant, which is the person that cleans the guest rooms. So traditionally, the guest room attendant is typically a woman. Traditionally, the house attendant is typically a man. So this was very different. And I thought it was obviously higher ups were very much opposed to it, but they weren't around. And I was willing to take the hit as the person in the region. And I approved this to happen. And it was such a magical moment to be part of this person's transition and accompany them in the job description, which was something so simple, right? And the camaraderie. And, I worked with the human resources department to make sure that they could have a specific restroom that they could use. And this was like years ago when none of this was very normal, but it was such a cool experience to be able to be part of that. And to this day, we still keep in touch with that team member because it was that important to them. So that was really cool. So my WTF had to do with upper management being completely opposed to this new situation.
Oh, I don't find that surprising at all.
Yes.
I think that a closing remark that I would have is that when you're in the hospitality business, you know that you're going to be seeing all kinds of people. You don't get to pick and choose who your clientele is going to be. So if you're in this field to provide hospitality to everyone, then you have to do your due diligence to actually know how to treat everyone. And oftentimes, like I said in the beginning, just to kind of advance loop there, when you treat everyone with equity, then everyone is getting a better service. They're having a better quality of service. It's not about streamlining to one individual or pandering to one individual. It is, I know that I'm going to be providing hospitality to everyone, so I have to know who everyone is.
Very, very great tip. Thank you for that. Robert, James, any last
I have
tips?
One last comment, and that is, I'll hear often, especially if you put your toe into any of these Facebook groups where there's hospitality hosts and conversations going on, and someone might say, I treat everyone the same. And you don't, and you don't want to. You don't put petals in the shape of a heart for someone that's a digital nomad, and you don't put the child's toys for someone that's there for a romantic evening and there's no children. So it's anticipating guest needs, and it's not so much someone just can back away. It's not about treating them the same, but it's treating them to their specific needs when they're traveling and their hospitality experience.
Yeah, fantastic analogy, Robert. That was great.
Robert, I'll tag on to that, and it's right. Anticipating the guest needs, and it's the same thing as a leader. Anticipating the guest needs. Remember, your employee is your internal guest.
Yeah.
And creating that safe space, creating an environment that they know they can be them and they can give their best. There is nothing more successful for a company. You do that with the employee, especially in the hospitality world. We all know the secret sauce is if you create an environment that the employee is happy, they're going to create an exceptional service. And it's a service profit chain. It's 101. And it's such a simple concept. And love is love, right? Love is love. We're in the hospitality field. There should be no other industry better than treating people the way they want to be treated than in the hospitality industry, because that's what we are paid to do. That's what many of us that are in this industry, it is in our heart, it is in our blood, it is in our soul. And if we could just translate across through everybody, and if you're a leader of hospitality, then it's on you to ensure that you've created the space.
Wow, mic drop.
This has been great. Thank you, Robert, Naomi, and James, for coming on to our show. And I think we've talked about a lot of different topics that our viewers will definitely be able to take back into using in their own hotel or business.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for allowing us to create that safe space where we can share this, and hopefully we'll do a second round, because I know we have a lot more that we can celebrate, and maybe we get together and talk about the wins, how things have changed, and what are some of those amazing things that we are doing these days to make sure that we continue to create that awareness. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.